We begin in Turkey, where results are coming in from the most closely contested presidential and parliamentary elections in decades. The main opposition candidate disputes results coming from the state-run news agency and says that he's ahead. But the governing party says that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan is leading. Let's get straight to Istanbul for the latest. Here's my colleague Sami Zeydan. Sami.
Adrian, it's a nail-biting night with people waiting, watching to see these results which will determine the future of this country and also its influence regionally and globally. Let's not forget there's something of a difference between the two major candidates when it comes to some of their foreign policy orientation towards Russia, towards the West and so on. Well, the big question tonight, of course, is results. Let's bring you up to speed with some of the results coming in. We're going with the results being provided by Anadolu News Agency. I'll clarify why that's important later. Those are the news agency, that's the official state news agency results. And just moments ago, this is how they stood, with President Tayyip Erdogan in the lead with 51% of votes. His main challenger, Kemal Kilicdaroglu, with 42% of votes. And the third challenger for the presidency, Sinan Oğan, with just over 5% of votes. And interestingly, or unusually, fourth candidate who actually pulled out of the race, Muharrem İnce, you might remember that, well, he's got 0.5% of votes, even though he's out. Probably can be explained by early votes cast. Well, this is so far with about 61% of votes counted. Well, that number is changing. In fact, as I'm looking now at the live feed coming into me here, 63% of votes have been counted, but the numbers still fairly close, with President Erdogan still in the lead there. We've got correspondents covering this story right across Turkey. Hashim Ahlabara is following events for us from the headquarters of the opposition, CHP party. We've got Resul Serdar also in Ankara, following developments from the headquarters of AK Party. And we've got Sinem Kosoğlu watching the streets in Turkey's economic and cultural heart of Istanbul. And of course, Zeynep Khodr outside of the major cities in the heartland, keeping her finger on the pulse of the people deep in the Turkish interior. We'll get to those correspondents later. But first, we're going to start right now with Hashim Ahlabara, live for us in Ankara. And Hashim, we've already heard some noises from the opposition concerning those results. Are we seeing a dispute emerging?
They are disputing the preliminary results which are coming from the state-run Anadolu News Agency, and they say that they were not representative of the reality of the ballots, and they say that it's going to be just a matter of time, and that by the time we get to 80% of the overall votes, we're likely to see their candidate taking a lead. The crowds are starting to gather outside the headquarters of the CHP party. We can hear them chanting pro-party slogans, and this sense of anxiety and tension which has been mounting is something we predicted, everybody predicted over the last few days, because we knew this is going to be a tight race, and this is why all the parties have been saying we have to monitor the vote count and we have to ensure that there are no irregularities during the count. Now, the CHP dispatched one of its top leaders, Ekrem İmamoğlu, the mayor of Istanbul, and this is what he had to say a while ago.
Yine bir Anadolu Ajansı.
Unfortunately, as in every election, the Anadolu Agency proved itself incompetent and incapable once again. But this will change during our leadership. We can no longer talk about a credible and reputable Anadolu Agency. When we look at these results, we can say that our esteemed leader, Kemal Kilicdaroglu, will become the next president.
So now the opposition now is looking at the latest developments, the latest account, and I think this is why they are trying and they're hoping to achieve They're hoping to be able to get to the point where their main candidate gets to something like 47, 48%. But they're hoping at the same time to see the other candidate from Sinan Ogan get to something like 6%. This is going to be good news for them because it could be a strong indication that they are going to go to a runoff. And if they go to the runoff, they say the dynamics could definitely change then, and then you have to talk about different scenarios, different politics which are going to be at play. Sami?
All right, thanks so much, Hashim Ahlabara, reporting to us there. And of course, we should remember that there is a parliamentary election going on. Let me bring you up to speed with that. We have about 53%, according to the numbers which have been revealed once again by Anadolu News Agency. That's the official news agency. 53% for the ruling alliance and about 32% for the opposition alliance. And at this point, well, they've counted about 45% of the votes for the parliamentary election. Let's go now to Resul Serdar. He's standing by live for us at the AK Party headquarters in Ankara. And we heard there from Hashim, Resul, about how the opposition is looking at these results. They're not very happy with it. How are AK Party officials reacting to that?
Well, Sami, so far we haven't seen any official statement being released by AK Party's officials. However, here you can see the supporters of President Erdogan and AK Party right behind me waving their flags, and there is a loud music, they're dancing, and they're waiting for their leaders, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, to arrive to the headquarters of AK Party in Ankara and to deliver a speech in the very balcony of the main building of the headquarters. So usually President Erdogan, after casting his votes, he will wait in Istanbul, and then late in the night he will come to Ankara to deliver the speech. However, this time the opposite has happened. Right after casting his votes in Istanbul, he flew to Ankara. He's expected to deliver a speech here to Turkey and also his supporters, and then flew back to Istanbul. So the hopes here are running higher and higher. You can see that the vibe, the excitement of his supporters is improving here, because the results are giving them a hope that they might be able to win the election in this very first round. So, Sami, it has been a very contested election. So both leaders, through their election campaign, have promised a lot. President Erdogan was simply focusing on the advancement of that the country has gone through, the progress that the country has made, and he was promising even a more powerful Turkey inside, and also a more assertive Turkey internationally, in the international arena as well.
Many consider this election to be Turkey's most significant in recent history. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan voted in Istanbul, where he began his political career. He has reshaped Turkey over the last 2 decades. His supporters believe he has made the country more powerful and prosperous.
We want everyone to vote because the independence and future of the country is at stake. We came here to vote for the stability and the growth of our country to continue.
Stability and continuity have been keywords throughout Erdogan's election campaign. He is now promising a more assertive Turkey in the international arena. He ended his campaign by visiting Hagia Sophia, Istanbul's famous mosque and historic cultural site, to appeal his conservative base. However, after more than 2 decades in power, he now faces his most difficult challenge. 6 opposition parties have joined forces for these presidential and parliamentary elections, with opposition leader Kemal Kilicdaroglu chosen as their unity candidate. His supporters are growing more confident that he will be Turkey's next president.
Many people's purchasing power has declined. At the same time, the rule of law has vanished. Justice has vanished. I want my country to become better in terms of justice, the rule of law and living conditions.
During Kilicdaroglu's election campaign, his main messages were change and hope. He promises a more inclusive democracy at home and stronger ties with the West. He concluded his campaign by visiting Anıtkabir, the mausoleum of the founder of the Turkish Republic, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, that is regarded as a symbol of secularism and republicanism in the country. Along with these symbolic maneuvers, many in Turkey believe the economy will be the most important factor determining the election outcome. People are facing rocketing prices as the country has one of the highest inflation rates in the world. That has been exacerbated by the 2 earthquakes in February. To win outright, a candidate must get more than half of the vote. If no candidate gets at least 50% plus 1 vote in the first round, the presidential election will be decided in a second round on May 28 between the 2 candidates who received the most votes. Resul Serdar, Al Jazeera, Ankara.
And as Resul was explaining there, the cost of living crisis, well, it's been one of the major issues, if not the major issue for many Turks in this election, guiding their voting behavior, we're told. Let's bring you up to speed with some of the numbers to bring it into perspective. Well, we're told that inflation peaked last year in October, reaching 85.5%. Of course, the annual rate of inflation for last year, 64%. The highest, October was the highest in 24 years. Well, now it's about half of that, around 43%, the last figures, monthly figures for April. The Turkish lira, well, it lost nearly 80% of its value to the US dollar in 5 years, largely because of the interest rate cuts, although, of course, there were other factors. And the government says reducing interest rates, though, has increased exports and increased investment. And they would point to the growth figure, the economy growing 5.6% last year compared to 2021. Unemployment is down. The jobless rate dipped to 10% in 2022 from around 14% in 2020, but obviously still quite high, a pain for many people. Well, when it comes to economics and commerce, of course, it's one city, Istanbul, that is the beating heart of this country's economy. There's been a big push, a focus on Istanbul by the major political parties. Sinem Kılıçdaroğlu is in one of the major commercial districts, Taksim Square in Istanbul. We can go to her live there now, and I understand, Sinem, it's been an unusually quiet day for Taksim on a Sunday, right? Indicative that perhaps people are more interested in elections than shopping right now.
Well, it seems like that, Sami. Today there was a heavy turnout in every poll station, at least in Istanbul. But however, this is Sunday. The weather was sunny during the daytime. It was very nice, like springtime. But Istiklal Street, just right behind me, we see only tourists, mostly from the Middle East. We don't see locals. It's unusually quiet. Of course, the earthquake actually had an impact on the business of Taksim Square. Many people were afraid, but of course, it has been nearly 3 months and the area was reviving again. But today, many people say that it's unusually quiet. During last week, during the last days before the election, the opposition was also giving some warnings that there might be some tension, especially about the security of the ballot boxes. They should be protected. Probably many were afraid that since everything was neck and neck before the election, and either if the government loses, they wouldn't accept it, or if the opposition loses, they wouldn't accept it. Probably this is why many people are watching the situation, following the situation from their homes. But surprisingly, Taksim is very quiet, which is not usual, Sami.
All right, thanks so much. Sinem Kılıçdaroğlu there reporting to us live from Istanbul. Let's remember, of course, there are many people voting around this country, not just in the major cities of Ankara and Istanbul, and many of them in rural heartlands. Some of those people have been impacted by those earthquakes which hit just 3 months ago, and these elections coming, after people are still struggling with the fallout from that. More than 50,000 people died when those two earthquakes hit on February the 6th, the World Health Organization describing it as the worst natural disaster in Europe in a century. And 14 million people across 11 provinces were affected. Many criticized the initial response as being simply too slow. The government's also been accused of failing to enforce building safety regulations, leading to more damage. The UN says at least 1.5 million people were left homeless. And the Turkish government estimates rebuilding could cost more than $103 billion. Zeynep Khodr has been out and about in some of those areas. She joins us now live from Gaziantep, where hundreds of thousands of survivors have been out to vote. First of all, Zeynep, tell us about how easy it was for them to get out and cast their ballot.
Well, it was a logistical challenge. We did watch a steady stream of voters arrive at makeshift polling stations because thousands and thousands of buildings either collapsed or are damaged, schools, hospitals. So the authorities set up container cabins as polling stations. We also went to the bus terminal, the main bus terminal in Hatay province, and we saw people arrive from across the country. People were, excited is the wrong word, they were determined. They were determined to make their voices heard because a lot of them were angry, especially people in Hatay, because people there feel that the authorities let them down. They did not receive help in the first few days in the aftermath of those earthquakes, and they say that they still have been left alone to fend for themselves. Little reconstruction work has begun, but we saw people determined, arriving at polling stations. Many of them actually live in tents, in containers. They still don't have homes, and that is why the election was so important for them. They are hoping that the man that they vote for will start the reconstruction process, will build them, homes. Now, but at the end of the day, the political landscape did not change. Yes, the earthquakes, the economy, they loomed over the election campaign, but in Turkey, loyalties rarely shake. And as you've seen with the results that are coming in, the AK party, the president, maintained his support in his traditional strongholds in a number of the quake-hit provinces.
All right, thanks so much, Zeynep Khodr there, capturing the spirit and the vibe there from Turkey's southern and eastern provinces. Well, of course, this is an election that has gripped people on all sides. It's really hard to try and remember another election in Turkey's modern political history where people have been so captivated and so polarized. Let's talk a little bit about that right now with our political analyst who joins us here, Ali Çakırioğlu. Good to have you back with us, Ali. So, first of all, maybe it's good to try and recap the results as where we are. Once again, we're looking at the results coming in from Anadolu News Agency. That's the state news agency. And they're saying now 69% of the votes have been counted. 69%. That's a significant proportion of votes. 51% of those votes have been captured so far by President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, and 43%, so a little increase there for his main challenger from CHP, Kemal Kilicdaroglu. He now is put at having captured 43%. Tayyip Erdogan, I think now it's time to talk about the points. It's 51.14 according to Anadolu. First of all, this is important, right? Because if we get below 50%, this is going to a second round, right? So this is why it's very important to pay attention to the small percentages. Am I right?
Yes, and it's been reported by journalists that the reason why the main opposition party is objecting is because many of the polling stations where Kilicdaroglu is ahead has been objected by the AK party people. And that's why their results are not official. Yes, are held up. And
so you're suggesting that this could change once that is sorted out?
That's the implication if this is a correct diagnosis by the journalists. If that is so, the difference could very quickly change.
How long does it take to sort out an argument at the polling station like this? Are we talking hours? Are we talking days or weeks?
We could talk about hours in some instances or days. So it might not be over anytime soon.
Right.
But the other issue, I think, is clear that the opposition candidate is not approaching 50%. So
as much as some people were predicting,
yes,
at least, right?
Just a couple of hours ago, many people expected that the first round would be won by the opposition.
Right. And I have to say, we were trying to be very careful with running away with polls, because polls have a history in this country of not being the most reliable, shall we put it politely,
not only polls,
right?
but also experts. I've been talking to experts, and almost everyone was expecting that, you know, it will be Kilicdaroglu in the first round with slim margin, but he's not getting close. What's emerging out of this picture is that a right-wing conservative such as AK Party, together with Sinan Oğan, who is a splinter from the Nationalist Party, hence a new coalition could emerge if Erdogan cannot be elected in this round.
So you're suggesting
in the second round,
that when we get to the second round, some of those voters for the third presidential candidate, Sinan Oğan, are more likely to go over to Recep Tayyip Erdogan because they're both within the right-wing camp.
And most likely, Oğan also would engage in a negotiation to actually ask his supporters to support Erdogan in return for
something, for an endorsement.
We don't know what. But,
all right. We've got to also talk about the parliamentary election that's going on. We can't forget that's going on, and the results coming in so far. Once again, I want to point out, because we know there's the opposition are disputing some of the results. This is by Anadolu News Agency. That's the official state news agency, and they're saying that according to the latest counting of votes, 52%, so more than half the votes of parliament have been counted. And the picture, well, it's a similar one, a lead for the ruling alliance. They have 53% of the votes, and the opposition alliance at 32%. When you look at both of these numbers, it does look like there is that earthquake, those concerns about the earthquake, the economic problems, haven't taken as big of a bite out of the support for the conservative group, right?
Well, the predictions of seats is very difficult.
Because seats in parliament.
Seats in parliament, because it all depends on the distribution of votes across provinces. And we have seen some results, but the whole picture is not clear.
Anadolu is saying about 335 for the that's more than half for the ruling alliance, but it's we should take it with a pinch of salt.
With a pinch of salt, because you need a model to actually predict the seat distribution on the basis of only partial results.
Right.
However, what's emerging here is that
that's because of the proportional representation system, and very complicated. We won't go too much deep into that.
And it looks like the strategy that was followed by the incumbent People's Alliance actually worked to their favor, and nobody expected that, because they adopted to have their own lists separate from one another. They didn't have a single list, which actually gives them an advantage in the DONT system. They adopted separate lists, but despite that disadvantage, they still are managing to capture the majority in the parliament, which actually is very comfortable for the new president. If that president happens to be Erdogan, he will have the comforting support from the parliamentary majority. Otherwise, it's a split
system between president and parliament. Let's see. We've still got some hours to go. Ali, we'll be back to talk about this. Well, thank you so much for joining us and explaining that to us. Let me quickly wrap the results where we are now. 70% of votes have been counted according to Anadolu News Agency. President Erdogan still in the lead according to the state news agency with 51. Here it gets interesting, 0.06, with Kemal Kilicdaroglu, the leader of the opposition, according to the official news agency, he's at now 43.12. There's plenty more to keep an eye on, obviously, here, but for now I'm going to hand you back to Adrian in Doha.